All right, we're recording. So here we are. This is the last session for Richard Rohr and Just This. It has been a journey. So we're glad to be starting tonight on page 125. This is chapter 12, Changing Sides. What we've been doing for the past 12 weeks, or 11 weeks at least, is we've been going through these 12, what he calls practices and prompts. And there are basic ways that we can go about in daily life to uh, further our contemplative practice, ways that we can hopefully lock ourselves into more and more of the aspects of contemplative practice just in our daily lives and moments. The first one was on beholding, finding a way to be able to see more clearly, non-judgmentally, cultivating heart attention, you know, bringing the thoughts from the head down into the heart. He had that image of seeing with the heart rather than with the mind. And so just not being so rational about our experiences, kind of like that sensory walk where you don't name anything, you just see it. Noticing the furies was dealing with the passions. That would be the emotional dysregulation, I suppose you could look at it that way. But the times that we get triggered emotionally and dealing with that, attending to the breath, using breath as a stabilizing factor and influence, scanning for malware, taking note of all this, what we used to call stinking thinking, right? And bringing that under control. Six was silence and bringing silence in. We have our four S's: silence, solitude, stillness, and simplicity. Silence is the ground of all of that. And then standing guard, dealing with the worries, all the contingency plans that roll around in our head and silencing those and dealing with that in a positive way. And then Danielle's favorite chapter in the whole book was the welcoming prayer. And so again, we're dealing with emotional triggers and how to bring ourselves through that. How to really, this has a lot to do with owning the shadow side, right? Because here comes all this stuff. And instead of judging it as bad, judging it as something that you shouldn't be engaged in or shouldn't even be present. No, it's part of you. It's an essential and integral part of you. So you acknowledge it, you welcome it, and then you move through it. And in so doing, you're adding to your ability to emotionally regulate. But it's also owning the shadow, as Robert Johnson's book was a few books ago. Practicing awareness, of course, is really the hallmark of what contemplation is all about. I mean, everything we're doing is practicing awareness and becoming more and more self-aware, more and more present in all our moments. The boats floating downstream and centering prayer in the 10th prompt is, again, just dealing with centering prayer now specifically as a practice, as an exercise in being able to more and more efficiently and quickly and reliably, repeatably, all of that stuff, to be able to get into that place of choiceless awareness where we're not thinking about any of our thoughts or thinking about any of our sensory input. And then last week was voluntary displacement. So this is where we kind of got into the question of what is evangelism really all about? You know, is it really about trying to convert minds to a certain way of thinking, a belief system, or is it really just experiencing the otherness of other people, other personalities, other cultures, and and thereby experiencing that displacement of self, loosening the grip that our sense of self, that egoic consciousness has on us as identity, continuing to loosen that. And now we're going to talk about changing sides. And so this is going to be the last one. So let's jump into this and see what we got going here. So what is the ultimate and defining position from which you look at life? This is page 125. What is the ultimate and defining position from which you look at life? Is it from the top down, from the edge in, from the bottom up? Is it from unrecognized white privilege, from clergy specialness, from access to money? Is it from chosen victimhood, from minority anger, from gender overcompensation, from implicit racism? Is it from your definition of salvation as compared to those secular liberals, arch conservatives, or infidels. To shift your consciousness about the way that you look at life, practice looking at it and being looked at from a different perspective by wearing different clothes, for example, and then observing how you see yourself and how others relate differently to you. I know this as a Franciscan and as a priest because if I wear my brown robe or my priestly vestments, people's response is always quite different than if I wear street clothes. I come in wearing jeans and no one notices the grungy old man. I come out in a robe and immediately get either smiles and greetings or fear and cold stares. We can only recognize our own privileged position or preferred identity when we try to live without it somehow. Those of us who are privileged in any way must take the initiative here. It is not wrong to have a self-image. We must have one in order to operate healthily. But the problem is our attachment to it and the unrecognized access and superiority it often carries. Remember, if we try to protect or project our self-image too much, there is far, far too much of me there. And it is not even me. And that's it. Kind of an abrupt ending, don't you think? Feels like it needs a the end or finis or epilogue or something that he just kind of stops. Any initial thoughts, reactions? Anything jump out at you? Not a thing? Not a thing?
Is this similar to the previous one a little bit, the voluntary displacement, where you're trying to see things from a different perspective than where you sit? Similar, I mean, just, taking yourself out of your comfort zone and looking at things differently.
Hmm.
I don't know if the meaning is the same as the previous one, but
I think maybe the difference between the two is that voluntary displacement is you putting yourselves, you're putting yourself into the relationship of the other, the place of the other. And with changing sides, you're doing it interiorly. You're trying to put yourself in a different perspective or see yourself from a different perspective. And then in that perspective shift, then you're also seeing how others would react to you within that shifted perspective. So you're entering the space of the other in involuntary displacement. You're voluntarily displacing yourself from your usual habitus, your usual place, habitat, and you're putting yourself into different scenarios. And that loosens the grip of the self. In changing sides, it's similar. You're going to be looking at yourself from a different perspective. So I guess one can build on the other if you want to think of it that way. But yeah, it's similar. I mean, when you think about all of these, Kathy, and everybody really, everything here, all 12 of these, and this whole book and contemplation itself is all geared toward loosening the grip that, our conscious thoughts have on us because they want to impose their identity on us. And that's our defense system. That is our our familiarity. Everything about ourselves, as we think of it, wants to assume that central place. And what we're trying to do with contemplation is loosen that grip, be able to more and more flow back and forth between the egoic self and the deeper true self. Because once we can do that and do that kind of at will, then we're truly using the ego as the tool that it is. But we know that that limitation is not who we are. And that repository for all of the hurts and traumas and fears and all the things that bedevil us no longer has that kind of hold over us. So really, all of these are trying to achieve the same thing. As we get more awareness, we get more of the awareness that this is not who we are. We can observe the machinations of our minds, but we don't have to be held captive for 19 months incarcerated, as Ellen said. Yes. We can make a different choice.
Oh, okay. So comments about it's anecdotal from my personal experience. So one is the first paragraph. It says unrecognized white privilege. One of my daughters is very pretty. And there was a term her cousin used, her 13-year-old cousin, that she has she has pretty privilege. Because this is what happened one time. And I go, what? She says, Mom, she was so proud. So she went out to lunch with her friends and says, the waiter, he paid for my lunch because he said I was so pretty. That scared me because, right, it can go negative. That's where you can manipulate men. And I find some men are easily manipulated that way. She can use it that way. That scared me. So I just said, okay, just say thank you, and that's it, right? It's a gift, that's it. But that is the self-image she's forming, but that is also the perception of others of her. The second one is more start two is our self-image versus others' perception of us. So my colleagues, co-workers were all from different ethnicities. So one of our chief pediatrician, who's Hispanic, she says, yeah, Ellen, I have to wear my white coat, my white lab coat, because I've been mistaken to be the housekeeper. I go, oh, I never realized that. So this is what it means too about the image we project, an image we others see us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing how the even clothing, and he spent some time with clothing here, can project things. I went to the last two. I drove Nina to her last two appointments to see her main doctor, and then we went to Hope by the City of Hope. Where was my head going there for a second? We went to City of Hope to meet a brand new doctor to get a second opinion. So when we met her existing oncologist, we're sitting there in the little clinical room, and he opens up. And there he is with a knee-length lab coat, hands jammed down in the pockets, and he's looking very, very doctorly. And immediately it just telegraphed doctor. When we went to the City of Hope, he sticks his head in the room, and he's not even wearing scrubs. He's wearing some kind of shirt with black pants. He looks like he's about 25 years old. His hair is tousled. And I thought he was a male nurse, I don't think they have orderlies anymore, do they? But he certainly did not look like a doctor and had to come in and introduce himself. It's just those initial perceptions that we have, you know, and we don't even realize how much we're projecting based on what we still believe about ourselves and who we think we are, and how embedded we are in our ego consciousness. And so, yeah, all of this stuff really makes a difference. And so what Rohr is saying here is that the more that you are familiar with and embedded with, and this idea of privilege, we need to talk a little bit more about too, because it's not just privilege in the way that we normally think of privilege in terms of something that we've inherited or something that's bestowed to us. It's what we have become familiar with. It's what we have come to rely on that gives us advantage, gives us a sense of confidence, gives us a way of being able to work through life. As Ellen was saying, her daughter will find that her privilege is that because of just her simple looks, you know, she didn't work to have them. She won the genetic lottery, and there she is, and that'll give her an advantage in life. But if she's not careful, then because of that advantage, she will let lie dormant other parts of her personality and skill set because she won't need them in order to be able to get where she needs to go. And so it's important for her to be able to put that aside and develop over here. But what he's saying, it's important for all of us to do that. Whatever it is that we have come to rely on that has now become our privilege, become our advantage, can we put that aside and experience a whole different side of ourselves, but also see ourselves and let others see us from a different point of view? And that also has that destabilizing effect on our ego, on our selfhood. So again, these are just prompts, they're practices, they're exercises, things that we can do that can help us along the way. Because all of this is working together really to affect the same overall goal. So starting back at the top, what is the ultimate and defining position from which you look at life? Is it from the top down, from the edge in, or from the bottom up? In other words, do you see yourself as an insider? Do you see yourself as an outsider? For the first half of my life, I always felt like I was on the outside looking in. I never felt connected. I never felt a part of something. And that has a profound effect on the way that you perceive life. It has a profound effect on the choices you make. It has a profound effect on your personality. Do you see yourself as an insider or an outsider? Do you see yourself as a have or a have not? You know, that's in other words, and I think this is an important distinction. Do you see yourself as a student or do you see yourself as a victim? And that is huge. And that has a lot to do with whether you see yourself as an insider, outsider, have or have not. But if you see yourself in life as a student, then everything that you experience is an opportunity for learning. And your basic question of life is, what does this have to teach me? And that takes a lot of sting out of the more difficult times of life. But if you see yourself as a victim, then of course the difficulties have been perpetrated upon you. And that's a very different way of looking at life. And so starting to understand how you and this is what the Enneagram is going to be about too, right? It's going to be about understanding the basic way that we approach life. What is the sum total of what we bring to the table at this point in our lives? What's our style? What's our way of dealing with adversity? How do we get further forward in life? So understanding how you look at that is going to be important. He says, and then he gives us this laundry list. Is it from unrecognized white privilege, from clergy specialists, access to money, or is it from chosen victimhood, minority anger, gender overcompensation, implicit racism? Is it from your definition of salvation? Take it into a religious vein, right? So you're looking at salvation this way as compared to all those unwashed others who are going to hell, right? So how do we look at life? And all this laundry list that he has in that first paragraph is all pretty negative stuff, but it could be positive too. It's not so much whether it's positive or negative, although negative tends to be a lot more limiting. But even the positive things can be limiting too, just like Ellen's daughter's beauty. That can be limiting, even though it's a positive thing. If we identify with it too much, if we rely on it too much or solely, then it can end up being diminishing and limiting for us. So if it becomes really one-dimensional, then it can be limiting for us. So we want to take a look at this stuff. How is it that you look at life? And that journey of self-discovery, that's where the Enneagram can possibly help us, and other tools as well. So to shift your consciousness about the way you look at life, practice looking at it and being looked at from a different perspective. To shift your consciousness about the way you look at life, practice looking at it and being looked at from different perspective by wearing different clothes, for example, and then observing how you see yourself and how others relate differently to you. So we're saying practice that. Find ways to do that. Find ways to be able to change your perspective. Take yourself out of your comfort zone. Move into a different angle, whatever, so that you can start to experience something from a different place. And it'll feel kind of like beginner's mind again, possibly. It can feel really uncomfortable. It can feel like you want to run back for cover. There could be a lot of things that could go on in this process. But if you're willing, just like involuntary displacement, to put yourself out into a different space, it can be really important.
Can we put legs on that a little bit? Because I will say there's the Simi Valley pastor that part of a mega church. I can't remember his name, but he has really done a lot of good work in the homeless, in the area of housing for homeless. And he did a thing that he's done before, apparently, but I didn't know about it. But he did a thing where uh, he lived off the streets for, I think it was like 3 days or 5 days and stuff, and in efforts to raise awareness. And then he'd do these blogs, right, or posts on Facebook about what he encountered as a homeless person, for 5 days. And that rubbed me the wrong way. I'm just like, you come from great privilege and yay for you, right? But to hold the illusion that in 3 to 5 days you can capture what a homeless person is doing. I mean, I just felt like that. It just rubbed me the wrong way. I can't truly identify what it is. But so I guess when you say, that we should practice kind of taking on these new identities, perhaps that's what he was going for to raise awareness. I don't know,
You
but I'm
know,
wondering what would that look like for us here in the group?
okay, okay. I'm really glad you brought that up because what he was really practicing was probably more voluntary displacement rather than the changing of sides. Although I guess there was a little bit of both since he was trying to live as one of them, at least for that short period of time. But here's the rub. We can voluntarily displace ourselves into another circumstance or situation, and we can absolutely not change sides at all. We are still coming at that from the same egoic position that we always had. In fact, we may even reinforce it further as we move into that kind of place, and nothing changes. I mean, this is one of the problems that we have when someone converts, from one religion to another, one thought system to another, one political party for another, one sports team to another. They really are the same person with a different uniform. Nothing has changed, and that's really the goal that we're trying. We're trying not to change things from the outside in, but from the inside out. Now, to put yourself in a completely different situation like he did in the homeless area, that can be really life transforming to experience something different, but it depends on how you are interiorly moving into that space. Are you doing it, I mean, the implication here, and I don't really want to imply anything, but you could do it from just the point that you want to be able to have material and content for your blog. It becomes very self-aggrandizing. What is the reason for you to do something like this? Is it really just a publicity stunt, or is it something that you want to do to really try to understand? I would say the more you publicize it, the less that I would believe that you're doing it from just wanting to understand. But there you are implying motives again, imputing motives again. But I'm hoping you're seeing the difference between the two. You know, we want to really start to see ourselves divorced from what we normally think of ourselves and how we normally see ourselves, so that once again we can keep chipping away at the moorings of the egoic consciousness that has such a hold over us. And if we're not doing that, then Jesus would say, you have your reward in full, but you're really not getting any further forward. And so we want to be careful about this. If we're really approaching this sincerely, we could do something like this pastor did, and it can be a really beautiful and life-changing experience, or not. But I think what he's talking about here in changing sides is different than that. You really don't need to put yourself in any different situation. It's the way that you approach the situations you're already in. I was going to do this later in the session, but let's go ahead and do this now. These are really simple and maybe even silly things, but maybe this will help us to understand what we're talking about here. Okay, can you see that?
Mhm.
Okay, so why changing the side of the bed will make you more creative? How many of you sleep on the same side of the bed all the time? I mean, yeah, Marion and I, we've got our sides, and it feels really weird to be on the other side. Sometimes when you go off and you're in a motel room or something, you end up on the other side, and it's just like, I can't sleep here. There's no way I'm going to be able to sleep here. All right, let's see what this guy has to say. My wife and I do not celebrate anniversaries. We don't have our own side of the bed for the same reason. We purposely switch bedsides as a way to avoid mine or your side territorial approach. But most importantly, as a small act to remind us, we don't want to live a life of repetition. Disrupting our routines helps us see things differently, thus making us more creative. This sounds trivial, but it's not. Small changes can have a powerful impact on our behavior. Well, let me show you how. Your routine can drag you down. And then he's got this quote. Einstein never actually said this, but it's kind of paraphrased from something he did say, but it's pretty cool. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Our routine is a series of habits that we follow without thinking. Okay, it's on autopilot. It's just the muscle memory that we've established. The brain is the most effective organ. It takes the shortest route with the least effort possible. That's why our brain loves routines. Sleeping on the same side of the bed or sitting exactly in the same place at the table or at church are perfect examples of habits we do without thinking. Routines are meant to drive efficiency and comfort. They provide familiarity at low effort, but it's precisely its non-challenging mode what drags you down. I read that badly, or maybe he wrote it badly. Paraphrasing Einstein, following the same routine over and over won't help you generate better ideas. Your brain is lazy, like your muscles, it defaults to not being challenged. But growth and learning only happen when you stretch beyond your comfort zone, as I explain in my book, shameless plug. Routines are repetitions. Your brain needs stimulation to develop new thoughts and ideas. If you want to be creative, you must disrupt your behaviors. Even good, healthy routines can drag us down if we don't break them and reform them from time to time, says Meg Selig. Routines can help focus your time and energy, but they can make you live on autopilot. My wife and I purposefully don't have our own side of the bed. We don't have formal anniversaries. He said that. I give her flowers to surprise her, not because I have to. An unexpected act creates a more profound impact. Creativity is also a byproduct of unexpected connections. By changing your perspective or doing things differently, your brain will stretch and boost your own creativity. Disrupt your routine by practicing these 6 exercises. So here's a few things that he says. Take the long way home. Following the same familiar route only feels repetitive but minimizes surprises. Try altering your way back home. You'll discover things that were unnoticed. Look through a tourist's eyes. When we travel abroad, we discover things that locals normally miss. They got bored of taking the same route and stopped observing. Wandering around or getting lost on purpose is a critical part of my creative process. Going for a walk is perfect for finding a solution to a problem you haven't been able to crack yet. Creativity is discovering things that are present, but no one else is paying attention to. All right, so kind of like a sensory walk, but also taking different routes, seeing something new, using beginner's mind, applying beginner's mind, seeing something as if for the first time, not naming it in your head and bringing all the associations that that name has for you. Avoid having your side. Number 2, having your side of the bed always sitting at the same place at your dining table is not just repetitive. It creates a sense of possession. A place becomes your place. That sense of familiarity can easily become too comfortable. Not only it creates a boundary with others, but also limits your experiences. The more comfortable you feel within your routine, the more afraid you'll be to try something new. By having your way of doing things, you become blind to other possibilities and leaves no room for creativity. See things from different angles. Things are not what they are, but what we observe. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Wayne Dyer. Walking in someone else's shoes helps challenge your bias. Now, that would be a form of voluntary displacement, right? The same as asking questions. When we assume the obvious, we stop being creative. How many times have you had conversations or maybe repeated conversations with someone and they never ask you questions? You have maybe ask them questions, but how often do people really ask you questions? How intellectually curious are they really? How much can they move outside of the buzz in their own head to actually bring you in, to want to know about you, to want to learn something new? Be that person who is the annoying interviewer, but ask questions, find out. Especially if you think there's a source of disagreement, that's where you really want to pepper with the questions. Once I visited my sister abroad. I asked her over and over how she liked her coffee, and not because I had a bad memory. Every time I asked, I was giving her a chance to experience coffee in a new way. Familiarity can get you stuck. If you anticipate other people's choices, you are limiting their ability to break their routines too. Add a physical limitation. If you think adventure is dangerous, try routine. It's lethal. Paul Coelho. Force yourself to use your non-dominant hand to write or brush your teeth. That would be fun. Brushing teeth is one thing. I don't know about writing, right? I can barely write with my left hand. Imagine what it looks like with my right hand. Watch a movie without audio. That's kind of an interesting one. I haven't really done that, but I like to, Marion and I both like to turn off the sound during the commercials because it's annoying usually. But it's amazing if you watch just the video feed without the sound, you experience it in a whole different way. The first thing you really get tuned into is how fast the cuts are going. I mean, they barely hold on to an image for more than a second and a half. And it's just cut, 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 cut. And you don't normally notice that as much when the audio is kind of gluing it all together, but you will see things in a different way. Let's see, where was I? Communicate with other folks without speaking. Well, that may or may not be possible, but I see what he's saying. The brain compensates for lost senses in just minutes, as research shows. It does so by moving that energy into other parts of your body. That's really interesting. When every sense works perfectly, we get comfortable. By introducing physical limitations, you can train areas of your brain that are underutilized. It also improves your flexibility and patience. Change your pace. Going faster or slower than usual is an effective way to disrupt your perspective. Letting someone else dictate your pace is a nice way of letting go. But most importantly, to change your focus. When we slow down, we focus on the details and appreciate the small things. When we speed up our pace, we can focus on the big picture. Changing your focus changes how you see things and sparks curiosity. There is this great story, and I'm forgetting the Chatwin, I think was his name. Anyway, he wrote the book called Songlines, and he was a novelist and kind of a travel log Brit that went down to Australia and spent time with the Aborigines down there. And he tells this story where he takes this Aborigine man sitting in the back seat of his Jeep, and he's driving through the outback at probably, I don't know, 25 or 30 miles an hour. And he notices in the rearview mirror that the man is frantically bouncing around in the seat back there. He's going to one side and then he's going to the other side of the Jeep and back and forth and back and forth. And all of a sudden he realized that he was still trying to recite his song lines, which are the chants that describe the landscape that is going by. But he was doing it from a speed of 25 miles an hour when walking pace is 3 or 4 miles an hour. So he slowed the Jeep down to 4 miles an hour, and the man just relaxed back there and then was able to, you know, do what he needed to do as if he were walking through the landscape. And that was an example of letting someone else dictate your pace. And of course, then he saw the land in a completely different way as well, not just as a Westerner trying to get from point A from point to point B, but actually experiencing the unfolding of the landscape itself. Do the same thing differently. Do you have a specific morning routine? Change its order. If you take a shower first and then have breakfast, next time do it the other way around. Do you have a favorite recipe? Try replacing some ingredients with others. Do you have a set time for waking up or dining? Change it. The less routine, the more life. Amos Bronson Alcott. Switching order, replacing elements, or changing your schedule will help you become more mindful of regular activities. When you increase your focus and connection with what you do, appreciation increases. The same happens with embracing doing chores as a meditation. A more appreciative mind is more generous and fertile. Both traits boost creativity. Experience things for the first time. Again, routines are good for productivity. I'm not against structuring your days, but repeating your behaviors every day narrows your perspective. Practice disrupting your routine. Don't be afraid to abandon your comfort zone. Overcome feeling stuck by experimenting with new behaviors. See how small changes to your habits can unleash your creative juices. Challenging our routines is not easy, though. Becoming more conscious of our daily habits and fighting inertia is demanding, but it's a great reminder to avoid a life of repetition. So whereas Richard Rohr just gives us this one example of wearing different clothes. You know, for him, obviously, since he's got a habit as a cleric, wearing street clothes or wearing his habit is going to be a huge difference in the way people see him, but it also changes the way that he probably conducts himself or comports himself in whatever routine. For us, changing what we wear or whatever, that can be something, but these are just some other examples. You know, now these are light and not really earth changing or anything, but I'm hoping to, especially to Danielle's point, what does it look like for us to try to see ourselves from a different perspective? These things can be, you know, maybe artificial, but concrete ways. that we can kind of put ourselves in a different perspective, see things from a different perspective. And all of these are just exercises. They don't have any real meaning in and among themselves. But if they can help us to chip away at the hold that the egoic consciousness has on us, it can be useful. How's that? Is that helping at all?
Yeah.
I oh, go ahead, William.
Yeah, I've always been attracted to the idea of like I think changing perspective is it allows you to have that or wow or that I forgot how we described it in an earlier section where when you understand things from another person's perspective, it gives you that, a light goes off basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that as small a thing as that might be, I think that's a spiritual moment, right? I'm trying to look back and see what chapter he was talking about there, but I think it was around the idea of wow or or something like that. Um, but
Oh, I remember that too. And it's not, I'm not remembering it either, but now I'm with you. I remember he called it something specifically. What was that? Shoot. Okay. What was your thought about that?
well, I mean, one definition of spirituality that I just always liked is that spirituality is about moving beyond the self.
Uh-huh.
And it's one of the things I enjoy as a psychologist when I'm working with clients. Just for example, if a client is having an interpersonal struggle, by just playing the devil's advocate and taking another perspective and allowing them to explore another perspective in the interaction, it usually is all it takes to soften some of the edges of our beliefs and our, you know, whatever it is that we're committed to being upset about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are some things that you could experiment with, and you could probably come up with others, you know. I would suggest not unilaterally deciding to stop celebrating wedding anniversaries. That probably wouldn't be a good thing to do.
Mhm.
I would discuss that thoroughly beforehand, but yeah, I don't know about changing sides of the bed. I have to think about that one. So that's yeah. I think some routines we can let live.
Mhm.
But are we willing to really just try to shake things up? Are we willing to try to see things from different perspectives? Are we willing to try to put ourselves? I remember when I took public speaking lessons, the woman who was teaching me, she was talking about that she was against abortion. As an example, and she said she won a ton of trophies on debating teams, you know, um, advocating for pro-life. And then as the exercise, she took the opposite side, pro-choice, and she said she won a whole shelf of trophies on that side of it as well. And she probably learned a whole heck of a lot more about why she believes whatever she ended up believing. But the point is, can we code shift that way? Can we take the opposite point of view and really, explore that and experience that and understand that? It may not change our convictions, but it's going to give us so much greater insight, and it's going to put us back into liminal space, and we're going to understand our opposition, why they believe what they believe, what their fears are that cause them to react the way that they do. And especially in this political climate, that would be the ideal thing for us to do, is to be able to move over into other sides and really experience things from that point of view, see ourselves from those different perspectives. That's the kind of thing he's talking about here. Because
But
all of
isn't
that
that
is challenging our sense of self. And that's what we need to do in contemplation.
but isn't that what lawyers do, the defense and the prosecution? You can believe somebody but you defend that person because that's your client. You don't have to agree, but you put your points, and that's where the debate comes. And then I
Well,
want,
if you're just doing it as a job and you're just doing it because it's what you do, then there's not going to be any real internal transformation. And we want to do this more authentically from the inside out, of course.
okay, so the other one is with Danielle's example, it didn't sit well with her, that example. And I remember I brought this up, I don't know, it was Tuesday or Wednesday. And this was like some years back. Prince William and Prince Harry also said, oh, yeah, we will live with the homeless. But it was like 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever. It's a great photo op. These are good looking young men. And yeah, it increased awareness, but you know you're gonna go home and take a hot shower. You know you're gonna have your dinner. You're not really homeless. So yeah, it's the same as the pastor. Now, what brought to mind who you say changing sides and really changing? And I was looking at the biography of Pope Leo. You were born and raised in Chicago, and you go to Peru in this small town in the mountains, and you learn the language and you learn the culture and you live with them. It's not that you're changing sides, but you're changing your, whatever the term is, your life. So
Well,
that's my
and
example.
that was his choice to do that. And yes, it was a huge voluntary displacement and ultimately became, I'm sure, a changing of sides for him to see himself, from a very different perspective. But the point is, we don't need to do that. We don't need to disrupt our lives. We don't need to move to a different country. We can do it where we're planted because it's really internal what we're talking about. If the external changes that we make are helping us with our internal perspective shifts, beautiful. If they're not, then they're just in the way. That's just noise. And one does not necessarily connect with the other. It's up to us to bring our whole self to the process, whatever we choose that process to be. But we don't need to do something as spectacular as Pope Leo in order to accomplish what we're talking about here. We can do it in such a way that we don't need to leave our footprint. And maybe no one else will even know what we're doing. That's okay. But they will see the change in us as we move forward. That will happen. Make a sense? Where'd she go?
I can I
We
pop?
lost her. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, I was just thinking, I'm also reading The Spirituality of Imperfection by Kurtz and Ketchum, and they reference Richard Rohr. I just read it last night, but he was in the reference they were talking about how he was referring to the third step, but he was talking about how spirituality is really the letting go of three basic needs: the need for control, the need to be right, and the need to be effective. And in reading this, I'm thinking um, being able to change sides, to switch perspectives, really would allow the letting go of all three of those. I mean, a lot of the routine that we do, and I don't know if it was in this reading or the article you were showing us, but where I mentioned like the effectiveness, and it's also just um, yeah, where we feel. I know for me, I can't speak for everyone, but I know from my perspective, in doing the same thing routinely over and over, I feel like I have a sense of control, even though it's a false sense of control. It is kind of a sense of control and effective. It seems like it's more effective in some ways, but I know I had a concussion too, like 3 years ago, and I started really kind of researching on better brain health. And that was one of the first things that they said is novelty and like doing different things. So I started journaling my dreams with my opposite non-dominant hand. And I mean, it took forever and it was really, I was so impatient, but I mean, I started analyzing and thinking about my dreams in completely different ways. I would think I was using different parts of my brain, but being able to shift, it felt like I was so out of control too. Like it was just so out of my comfort zone, but it was so it allowed me to be present and not on autopilot and just really mindful, like when we're driving, going different directions or learning a new instrument or anything, we're aware, we're present. And that's so huge as far as just being here and now and just finding complete contentment in just this rather than just like being distracted by our own thoughts when we're kind of just moving through the motions of our lives.
Hmm. Oh, that's some great stuff, Sarah. Yeah, I love that journaling with the non-dominant hand. That's and doing the dream journal too. That's
Yeah,
great.
it's
You know,
fun.
I was just thinking as you were talking and what they said, letting, walking at a slower, faster pace, letting someone else set the pace for you and as a way of letting go. Marion and I took her parents up to Big Bear last week or the week before, whatever it is now. Weeks have passed so quickly. And her parents, they don't get around very fast anymore. And so when we were trying to walk even from the restaurant to the car, or we did try to walk to a couple of stores and that didn't go very far. But to keep pace with them, to let them set the pace and walk with them, it was like excruciatingly slow. So you could either fight it or you could walk out ahead or you could just try to flow with it. And I found myself somewhere in the middle. I was trying to flow with it, but I ended up a few paces ahead. And, but if you're really paying attention to it, it's just like, wow, that changes everything. And if you really give yourself over to letting them set the pace and just what does life look like from 2 miles an hour instead of four? It changes things. It really does. So these are small things. They're not big things. They're the six that I read over here, not big things, but they can have an impact if we actually enter them and truly enter into them the way we're talking.
I
I
really, I really
uh,
like that journaling with the left hand thing. The one of the things I share with my clients is that one of the reasons we recommend journaling is that you slow your mind down to the pace of your pen when you're writing. So it helps you to slow your thoughts a little bit. And if you're doing it with your non-dominant hand, it really slows it down to a snail's pace and allows you to really begin to look at your thoughts rather than being swept away by them. So I'm going to steal that one for my clients.
Yeah, I did that a lot when I was running the treatment center, doing the non-dominant hand. It really, if you're wondering what's going on and you have unidentified anxiety or depression or whatever, you don't know what you're angry about, well, just use your non-dominant hand and get into a little dialogue and it'll come right to the surface because, all my little perfectionist in the eating disorder place was just like, oh, I can't do it. But the other thing that I did with them is they had to wear mismatched clothes for a day. So we had a whole day where I had all the staff and everybody came in mismatched clothes because they're all about body image and stuff. So that was always a fun intervention. But I will say this morning, and this has happened, we go to the boardwalk to walk our dogs periodically. And, I get to the boardwalk and I'm all about the exercise. I just want to, come on, let's go, And I have my sweet Bailey boy who just insists on taking his own sweet time, wants to smell every smell, wants to go at his pace. And I took him this morning, and every time I do that boardwalk with that boy, it's always called a mindful Bailey walk.
Yeah.
But it's good. It's great because I slow down with him. I notice, I appreciate more of what's out there because I'm not so worried about, okay, I got to get my exercise in.
Mm.
Mhm. This is all good stuff. Being aware of it and consciously choosing it, and then giving ourselves to the practice of it, that's going to be the key. We're not doing this for any other reason than we're really trying to experience something different and to show ourselves a different side of ourselves. So yeah, this is all of these examples are good ones. Just to finish up, he says we can only recognize our own privileged position, our preferred identity. And I think that's a good those two images together, privileged position, that can bring in all sorts of political aspects. But preferred identity, I think, locks it down into what we're talking about. You know, this idea of a privileged position is really a preferred identity. It's our familiar identity, how we have come to see ourselves, that refined image that we have of ourselves in our minds, what we project to others that we believe will be to our greatest advantage. And it's practiced enough, it's muscle memory enough that it does have that advantage for us. It's something that we can just go to, and it's proven to work for us. And so that's what we're talking about here in terms of this privilege. It's not bestowed or inherited necessarily, or maybe we built on what was bestowed or inherited, and we built this image. So that preferred identity, we can only recognize it when we try to live without it somehow. Those, in other words, yeah, until you step away from it, you don't even realize the place that it has in your life. It just is who you are. It is your reality. It is the air you breathe. Until you step away from it and you realize, oh, okay, it's a construct. It's something that I have put together, and I can step into it or I can step out of it like a pair of jeans, right? Those of us who are privileged in any way must take the initiative here. Okay, who are privileged in any way. Those of us who have built something that works for us, that is to our advantage, that allows us to be able to make circumstances and people conform to our wishes. That's about this privilege we're talking about. We need to take the initiative. It's not wrong to have a self-image, of course. We must have one to operate healthily, but the problem is our attachment to it and the unrecognized access and superiority it often carries. That unrecognized part is the important thing. If we don't see the operation that we're a part of, then we can't change it. And if it's limiting us, then it will limit us without any ability of ours to break free. All right. The unrecognized access and superiority it often carries. A lot of our judgment, when Jesus is saying, don't judge, you know, the way that we judge moments, the way that we judge circumstances, the way that we judge others has to do with how we see ourselves and the advantage that we believe we have and need to maintain and defend. All of that is largely unconscious. And if we don't make it conscious, then we're not going to be able to see how it is limiting us again. Remember, if we need to protect or project our self-image too much, there is far, far too much of me there, and it is not even me.
Mhm.
What I initially thought that we'd do, because I always think we're going to have more time than we end up having, was to go back to the first chapter, which is the introduction, awe and surrendering to it. And if you want, go back and read that first chapter again. It's only 4 pages long. Too much to read tonight since we're at time. But what it kind of did was bring us back full circle again, you know, because really what we're talking about here is a serial experience of awe. Awe is that vastness that we can encounter. It can be in very small things, just everyday things, when we really see them, when we have slowed down to that snail's pace and we actually see them as if for the first time in a different way, and it just transports us and it challenges the way that we think. Those moments of awe to the spectacular ones, to cultivate those in our lives, to create a serial encounter with awe throughout our days is really what contemplation is all about. And how we go about doing that is a necessary emptying, which is really what he's talking about here in changing our sides. Changing sides is emptying ourselves. What did Jesus actually do? What's the kenosis? What was the incarnation? But the emptying of everything that Jesus was into human form. And so at that level, we're seeing Jesus doing the same thing. He's experiencing life from a completely different aspect. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he was a prince, a very wealthy prince, and he saw an old man, a sick man, a funeral procession, and a monk who was begging. And that led him to want to experience something different than the privilege that he had known his entire life. And so he goes outside the palace and takes on the garb of a peasant and lives this wandering ascetic life in search of enlightenment. And so we see him doing the same thing, voluntary displacement, but also this idea of changing sides and seeing himself from a different perspective. Francis of Assisi, exactly almost the same story, right? The son of a wealthy nobleman and a trader and a trader with a D. And he's living this life of privilege. And through a series of events, he voluntarily renounces his birthright, renounces all of that, and then lives a life of voluntary poverty. So once again, this is a motif. How many stories are there of the king of the prince who disguise themselves as a peasant or a beggar and walk through their kingdom to try to learn what really the people are all about and how they understand him? The prince who's looking for a bride, right? But does it under the guise of the beggar to see what the woman is really like. To be able to view true reality from outside of our normal persona is really what contemplation is all about. And so if any of these prompts and practices can help you in that, as you're also cultivating your 4 S's, your quiet time, your meditation or whatever, then they all will work together. They will all work together for good for those who love the Lord, right? And there you have it. 79 weeks, just like that. 19 months of incarceration, as Ellen said. Any final thoughts? Any last benedictions? Any good riddances? Come on, what do we got here to tie this thing off with? Anything? I guess we lost Danielle, huh? We keep losing people. Ellen came back.
Where'd she go? Oh.
Yeah, well, Ellen lost connectivity. Maybe Danielle did too.
She just texted, said she has to head out because she's meeting some people at 8. So
Okay.
she stepped off.
Okay.
It's a good book. We dissected it to death, but we wanted to, apparently.
But it really was that each page was a huge jumping off point for us to have conversations that sometimes only had slight relevance with what was on the page, but we had good conversations no matter what. But
And invited us to explore things that we didn't really focus on.
Yeah.
And how they show up every day in our life, and they're present for us to use as tools every day. But we got to be aware of them.
Yeah.
The idea of reading the first chapter is a good idea to kind of bring it full circle. It's interesting. I've kind of forgotten.
Yeah, I know it's been such a long time, but now based on everything that we just said and how we concluded here tonight, if you do go back and read those first 4 pages, I think it'll have kind of a gluing effect. It'll kind of bring us full circle and bring it back around to remember this is what we started out 79 weeks ago to talk about awe and this serial experience of awe, which diminishes our sense of self and brings us into a whole different perspective. And now we've gone through all the nuts and bolts and these last 12 practices and prompts. I think it might be good to just kind of pull it back together again for you. But we didn't have time to do it together, but see what you can do. All right, so next Wednesday, July 9th, we're going to be starting with this book, Roaming Free Inside the Cage, and a Taoist approach to the Enneagram and spiritual transformation. So if you if you never have taken an Enneagram test, if you don't really have any experience with Enneagram, hopefully you got the emails that I sent out. If you didn't, let me know, and I'll send it out to you. There is a free test that Kathy found for us. You can take that and kind of just see, what you see. And there's a lot of explanation about the Enneagram that would be good to kind of just get a basic grounding. This book does not spend a lot of time on trying to understand the Enneagram or your type. That's not its focus, which is one of the reasons I was interested in doing it. This is using the Enneagram overall as a tool for our spiritual progress and transformation, and seeing it through the lens of Taoist philosophy, because that really helps lock it in terms of how this can work as a tool to help us. And so we're not going to take the book entirely linearly, and I'm not planning on doing the whole thing, but I'm trying to boil it down to those pieces that really can lock it in as best as possible. And we'll talk about that, the structure of it on next Wednesday. So hopefully we'll see you all then. All right. Scotty.
Father God, thanks for this adventure we've had traveled these many weeks, and the blessing of the things we've learned, and we've been invited to expand our consideration of different things that go on in our life. We love you, Lord. We thank you for the kindness that you show us every day, and for the encouragement we receive from one another, and knowing you and knowing what you have showed us about our lives. Lord Jesus, we pray and we give our thanks, and we do it all in your precious, mighty name. Amen.
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 Thanks everybody for a great journey and for,
Good night,
for
everybody.
being the
Goodbye.
Bitterwinders.
Good night. Good night.
Thanks for having us.
See you Sunday.
Do we have to sit at
We
another
will.
place in church on Sunday, Dave, or no?
That's entirely up to you.
You
Don't
could have-
expect to see me in
taking
any
your
It's up to
seat.
Mary, and
black.
Mary, you tell us if we have to sit at another
Get up
place.
on stage. Get up on stage next.
That'll
Less
change the
likely to do
perspective.
that, but
But I guarantee I'll
kidding.
still be wearing a black shirt.
some
Don't
things
anybody
won't
suggest
change.
that getting on stage to John?
Oh,
That's right.
that could be bad. That could be bad.
All right.
Love
Bye,
you guys.
everybody.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Janice, see you
Bye,
guys
Sandy.
Sunday. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye, Jordana. Bye, Scotty.
Bye. See you on Sunday.
And then Sunday.